Well, good afternoon. Welcome to RIA Match's webinar, How to Increase the Value of Your Firm. I'm Mary Ann Buchanan, founder and CEO of RIA Match. Thank you for joining us today. We have a good number in attendance in the audience. What I'd like to do first is just cover some quick housekeeping for the group. So let's do an audio check. Raise your hand if you can hear me. If you see on the panel on the right, there's a little motion there. Oh, there's one hand. Hello, Lizette, Morgan, Jim, Scott. Great. Hands are going up all over the place. Awesome. Thank you very much. Most everybody can hear me. So I just want you to test that because we have an interactive day webinar today. So I just want to make sure everybody can hear. Okay, now your line should be muted automatically for the webinar, so that will work out just fine. What we want to let you know is that the webinar is being recorded, and it'll be up on the site, on the RIA Match site, on the webinar page by tomorrow. We're aware that a number of people who were unable to join us today, so be sure and let your colleagues know that the session is recorded and they can listen to it at their convenience. Okay, how will we take questions? We'll take your questions in the chat box in the panel. That's also to the right. So any questions that we don't answer will be included in the Ask the Panel section of the RIA Match site. And we'll also include the questions that are answered. So please keep your questions general, anonymous, and high level. So let's go ahead and test out our chat box. Good. Very good. Thank you, guys. Let's go ahead and test our chat box. Everyone type into your chat box the city you're calling from. Let's see where everybody's located. Okay. You looking for that chat box? Okay, so we've got Dallas, Texas. Someone says howdy. Wilmington, North Carolina, Boston, Providence. Okay, Syracuse, New York, Newton, Mass. Wisconsin. So good. Everybody's figuring out how to do that. That's great. Thank you. We'll be conducting polling during the webinar, and we'll share the results with you as we go along. So that should also be insightful for us. I'd like to share with you the results of the questions you answered when you registered for the webinar. So what types of firms are participating in this webinar today? Well, 13% of you are early solo practitioners. 35% are mature solo practices. 26% are early ensemble, 13% mature ensemble, and 13% of you are market dominators. So among those of us who gathered today, 51% of you have a contingency plan. 33% have a succession plan. So what we hope to do today is cover some valuable information, and we trust that you will benefit from it. So we hope you enjoy the webinar. So very briefly, what I want to do is answer the question about what is RIA Match. RIA Match is a website that offers financial advisors solutions for succession planning and growth. The website matches financial advisors with other financial advisors and RIAs who want to buy, sell, merge, or join practices. The advisors and the RIAs can search for free and pay to connect anonymously and securely on our site. We are independently owned. Our mission is to create an efficient market for advisors and RIAs to partner their practices. Our site is agnostic as to platform or custodial platform or independent broker-dealer or whoever. We've created the playing field. We're not calling the plays, and we don't benefit from them. It's a pure approach designed to serve all advisors, regardless of scale, scope, or experience. Our goal is to bring advisors the most efficient tools and excellent information so you can make the best decisions for the succession and growth of your firm. So let's get started. What we'd like to do today is focus our discussion on ways you can increase the value of your practice, whether it's whether that is for growth or succession or simply just to increase the value of your practice. Obviously something we all want to do. Now we're not talking about wholesale changes, not expensive changes, but smaller changes, manageable changes. Changes you can easily implement but will impact and increase the value of your firm. So let me introduce our panel of experts that have joined us. Corey Kupfer is partner at Hamburger Law Firm, and he's also Director of Entrepreneurial Services at Market Counsel. Market Counsel is affiliated with Hamburger Law Firm, and it is a business, regulatory, and compliance consulting firm for the entrepreneurial investment advisory firms nationwide. Corey has been a successful entrepreneur from age 15. That's a rarity among attorneys. He both understands and appreciates how business people think. Corey believes his role as counselor is to foster business dealings by assessing and managing risk, not by restricting the options and opportunities of his clients. Thank you, Corey, for being here. David DeVoe is founder and managing partner of DeVoe & Company. Previously, Dave served as managing director of strategic business development at Charles Schwab Advisory Services. In this role, he developed and led Schwab's transition planning platform, which provides comprehensive M&A and succession planning services to registered investment advisors. During this 8-year period, David provided strategic counsel to over 300 advisors. Baltimore Cole is Vice President of Practice Management and Consulting for Fidelity Institutional Wealth Services. Fidelity is a leading provider of custody and brokerage services, and also Fidelity Institutional Wealth Services is a unit of Fidelity Investments. In Baltimore's role, he's responsible for helping IWS advisor clients drive more effective business growth. Baltimore manages the practice management programs, consulting, platforms, and third-party partnerships that serve clients in the area of business development, talent management, M&A, and succession planning. Baltimore regularly facilitates workshops, roundtables, and study groups to help advisors learn and act on industry's best practices. Beverly Flaxington is co-founder of The Collaborative, and she's authored many books addressing corporate team building. Two of my favorites are Understanding Other People and Making the Shift. Beverly is a business building expert, and her company consults on many levels in the advisory world. The Collaborative moves firms from vision to reality. And that's going to pop up all the way through. I apologize. I'll just keep moving it. And I'm Mary Ann Buchanan, and I'll be moderating the panel today. So let's begin our discussion. We're going to focus on 3 main elements. We will identify drivers of firm valuation. We're going to discuss strategies advisory firms can take to increase the value of their firm. And we'll share actionable solutions that you can implement. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our first polling question. Let's see if we can, oops, sorry. Oops, here we go. There we go. We've got a little technical problem already. Don't you love it? Hang on one second. We're going to do the polling, and I'm going to launch the poll, and then I'll move the question over so you can just see my mail. Okay, so let's take a look. The poll will appear on your screen for 20 seconds, and then it will go ahead and we'll gather the answers. So our first question would be, okay, the poll is open. Please take a look. Okay, our poll is in progress. 55% of you have voted. It's 20 seconds. We'll give it a little bit more time. See if we can't get a few more people to bring the screen to the front and vote. Okay. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and close the poll here in 4 seconds. Okay. So we've closed the poll. So the question is, do you have a contingency plan in place? Have you identified another advisor? 41% of you have. Let's see if I can release this answer in front of you. And so 41% of you have identified an individual, and 59% of you have not. So Corey, let's start with you. As an attorney who works with advisors creating their contingency plans, can you talk to us about contingency plans? Where does an advisor begin legally? What are the legal components?
Sure, absolutely, and we're going to focus in most of my little bit of time here on the human capital element of it and some of the legalities around it. But first, I want to talk about some of the other elements of a contingency plan because they're really important. And when we talk about creating value, we also want to talk about preserving value in a firm. And unfortunately, with what we've seen, for example, with whether it's Superstorm Sandy on the East Coast or the horrible tornadoes and throughout the middle of the country or earthquakes in California, we live in a world where there's nothing that's guaranteed to be safe. So part of your contingency plan should include things like backup of data, of knowing what would happen if there, God forbid, is one of these disasters in your area. Where does your staff go to be able to continue to provide services to clients? How do you access your data? What if the physical office is unavailable? Where are you going to work out of? What are your backup systems, not only in terms of the computerized systems, but if you're not all digital and you have POD files, how are those protected? So those are the kind of things that we have unfortunately seen in our practice with clients who have been in these storm areas, for example, where it could be a real setback for firms that aren't set and ready to go. And then, of course, for many of our clients, although they have clients all over the country, a lot of the clients may be concentrated in the same geographical area where they are. So they may be similarly hit, and and they may have concerns. And listen, let's face it, our people in this industry, our advisors are trusted advisors for clients, and it's not often not just about their money, but those who do financial planning or have a great relationship with their clients, they're often one of the first people to be called. So when people are in a difficult situation, if you're not accessible to them, that can impact your relationship with your clients and your ability to be seen as a trusted advisor. So like I said, we're going to jump on the human capital side and the legal side, but there's really this whole side about the physical space, the technology, and even the business processes. We have a whole contingency plan that served us well here at Hamburger Law Firm and Market Counsel when we got hit with Superstorm Sandy, where we were, had no power, but was still able to work and still able to serve our clients. So that's very crucial.
Well, that's right. And you, that's right. With Sandy, you lived the contingency plan. You know exactly how that works.
We did. Yeah, we did. We did. In fact, we had backup power systems. We were only out for a day here. My home was out for over a week. I spent more time in the office that week than I did at home because we were much better set up here than we were than I was residentially.
No doubt. No doubt.
So that's all really important, and it's not it affects your clients, affects your business, and it's crucial.
Great.
The other question really is for our certainly for our solo advisors, in those situations, who's going to take over for them, or now we're starting to move to the human capital side. What happens if you, as the advisor, it becomes temporarily disabled or is unable to service clients for any reason, whether it's a family emergency, whether it's a health situation, whether you're in a different part of the country or the world and something happens and you can't get back. I was glad to hear that there's a decent percentage of people who say that they have a contingency plan in place.
Right.
What we have found when we review those is that sometimes they're not adequate, so you really want to review it constantly. But also what you want to do is line somebody up. Now, if you're in an ensemble firm in a partnership, you may have one of your partners. You may have key high-level employees who are registered advisors who can step in, but you want to be clear on who that's going to be, even in those cases, and who has authority to do what. Because just because you've told somebody, hey, if I'm not around, you do this. Well, do they have signing authority with the bank?
Exactly.
To cut checks, for example. Do the custodians and the other service providers and key industry partners know that they're authorized to act on behalf of the firm to execute client wishes or to handle banking transactions or whatever it is. And then certainly, And then certainly within the, for firms that don't have anybody inside, that's more challenging. And do you have somebody that you've identified at other firms or friends of yours in the industry who is in a position to step in? And then is there a proper legal agreement in place that gives those people authority? At a very basic level, for example, a limited power of attorney. We're not concentrating on this call on bigger succession planning conversations, but at a minimum, a limited power of attorney or some similar document where somebody has the legal authority to come in and be able to act on behalf of your firm if you're not there and you have nobody in it to be able to do that. So,
you know what?
This slide. Good.
So sorry, Corey. What I think you've really hit on an important point, and I know your slides speak to it. And the thing that is, one thing I want to sort of highlight is, Bev, from a team building perspective, what Corey was saying is right on. But how should a solo practitioner begin to identify another advisor to be her contingency plan, her backstop?
Well, I think probably to answer this, Marianne, you want to start with what people shouldn't do, which is the more common way to do it. So what a lot of people who are in solo practice, even if they're not thinking about succession, they know that they need that backstop. Corey talked about the contingency aspect. So they may find somebody that they can align with, that they have an agreement, this person will take over my clients if something happens to me. Or it may be somebody who's thinking eventually I want to bring somebody into my firm and turn over the reins. But the number one reason that most advisors will pick someone is because of the likability factor. It's someone that they get along with. It's maybe somebody who they're friendly with, that they have good business discussions with. And if you're thinking about somebody who's going to step into your shoes, so to speak, and work with your clients, you really have to be looking at this from a different angle, which is philosophically, do you agree with this person? Does this person serve the clients the same way you serve the clients? Are their investment philosophies aligned with yours? I've seen situations where the likability test was met and then something happened and the clients were miserably unhappy because this advisor who then stepped in didn't serve them the same, anything like the person they were used to. So really important to step out of it as far as, do I like this person, do I want to hang out with this person, and really look at it as, what is it going to be like if this person was serving my clients? What's the client experience going to be like? How much is this person like me in their service approach? And really dig into some of those business issues, really critical.
Yep, that's key. Baltimore, you recently told me a story about an advisory practice that did not have a contingency plan. Would you be kind enough to share that with us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Marianne. Continuity is very critical. That's why I'm excited to be part of this call. As we work with our 3,000 plus clients, it is an increasing focus for us. And so one of the stories that I shared with you really has to do with many of our clients who aren't prepared. And I'm really glad you're hitting this topic and agree with Corey's sentiment. We're getting an increasing number of calls from sole practitioners, those who are really responsible and carry the burden for their firm. And sometimes they are less pleasant calls. Recently we had a call directed from our retail side of Fidelity, one of the investors that works through our advisors, and they eventually got over to the right place. And the bottom line is that they were working with a registered investment advisor, a client of ours, and just weren't receiving any return calls. They needed help on their accounts, on their advisory accounts, and we then tried to reach out to our client, couldn't do so. Looked up online through their ADV that the husband of this female advisor was a 5% owner. Tried all the week in many ways to reach out to make contact. It just didn't happen. And so bottom line is the advisor had passed away and there was no continuity plan in place. No one knew how to pick up the reins, nothing on file, and we ultimately had to take care of that end investor, and we did so, but it was through the Fidelity retail side. So that's happening more and more.
Yep.
I can't speak more more forcefully that we're committed, and you as clients, you as advisors should be extremely committed to your clients first and your family to take care of this issue.
Very good.
And Marianne, just to jump in and close it out,
Sure.
If all of what we said isn't enough of an incentive, it's actually a requirement under the Investment Advisors Act. There's a rule 206-47, which makes it very, very clear that having a contingency plan is part of the advisor's fiduciary duty, and they have to deal with natural disasters, ceasing operations, death, disability, and it's actually a regulatory requirement to have it.
And, this is good to know, Corey. And what I feel is that from our experience that advisors want to have the contingency plan, they just don't know how to go about it. So one of the things that is not in the store now but is going to be in there is really how to go about it. What is, before you go to market counsel or whichever attorney you choose, what is the information that you need to gather together? So we're going to be following up on that and giving you some important information. So we're on to our, thank you very much. We're on to our next polling question. Okay, you guys ready? Let's see if I can launch this easily enough. All right. So the poll is open. We'll see. We had 71% participate last time. So the question is, what is the most accurate way to evaluate an advisory company? Okay, we've got voting started. Tremendous. We've got good answers coming in. This is a multiple choice. Okay, it's been open for 25 seconds. We're going to leave it open for 30. Okay, maybe 35. 63% have voted. This is actually kind of cool. I love technology. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll. And I'm going to share the results. So no one chose book value as the most accurate way to evaluate an advisory firm. 42% say multiple of revenue, 33% multiple of cash flow, and 25% discounted cash flow. And thank you, 80% of our audience voted. Thank you very much for that. So Dave, we realize that there's no silver bullet to valuation, but what is the best way to value a firm? Can you sort of speak to that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say it's great that everyone in the poll indicated that book value was inappropriate. Matter of fact, I think if we have a slide you can pull up, we have a little more detail on this as well.
Yeah.
But book value is totally inappropriate. I think everyone on the online knows that's really the hard asset of an organization. And for an RIA, that's the cost of some desks and computers, maybe tens of thousands of dollars worth of stuff for firms that could be worth, in many cases, millions or even tens of millions of dollars. Multiple of revenue and multiple of cash flow are two examples of comparables. You see comparables in that middle box. And that's not unlike a PE ratio. It's essentially the approach is to say, there's a number of comparable firms to the organization that you're valuing. We have great transparency into those organizations, their efficiency, their productivity, their profitability, a whole variety of factors, how good they do what they do, and transparency into the valuation. And then you can say, all right, the firm we're valuing compares to these others in this manner. And one recently sold for 1.8 times revenue, and the firm we're targeting or the firm we're valuing is more efficient than that, so it should be higher or lower. It's a good back-of-the-envelope way to value a firm. Unfortunately, it's a very blunt instrument. You can imagine for a PE ratio, it's a really powerful approach because you have great transparency. You have transparency into let's use an example, Wells Fargo, comparing Wells Fargo to 20 other financial institutions. You clearly have great transparency in of those 20 other firms to get the P. And then you can look at the E by looking at the audited financials, audit ratio analysis. Significant events are required to be reported. There's a very rich source of data to compare Wells Fargo to all these other firms and determine if it should be above or below the mean, if it should be in the top decile or the fourth decile, et cetera. With privately held firms, and 99% of RIAs are privately held, there's no transparency into either element. So we can't look at 25 other similar to yours when you value it, book evaluations in the marketplace, much to our chagrin. So we don't have great transparency into pricing. Development company, we're an investment banking firm. We've done 35 valuations since we launched, a total of 50 engagements. And I've chatted with investment bankers and folks that have done deals for 10 years. And we still don't have great transparency into all the deals that are done in the marketplace. But it wouldn't matter anyway, because a target firm with a certain revenue line compare it efficiently to 10 or 20 other firms that have recently done transactions. We don't have transparency into the number of employees that they have, which alone is 75% of the expense structure. So the multiple approach has some value. It can give you a ballpark of what you can afford. It can be, give you as you're starting to negotiate something. But ultimately, you want to move toward a discounted cash flow model. And that's where you're projecting just today's cash flows, but cash flows into the future to determine what this firm could be worth. And it's really the cash flow number that's going to pay back the investor on the investment. So the discounted cash flow is a methodology where you're not just cleaning up this year's numbers, as you might do for a multiple of cash flow, but you're looking into the future and thinking about new hires and thinking about the growth rates and how expenses are going to change. And then you're discounting those cash flows back to present day based on the appropriate amount of risk associated with that firm. So it's more technical. You're talking about dusting off books and or perhaps hiring an investment banker. But when you're making such a critically important decision, selling an organization that you've spent 5, 10, or 25 years building, or you're looking to deploy a fair amount of capital, your personal money and assets, into a deal, it's probably best to move away from a calculation that you can not only do on a napkin, but you can do in your head, be multiples of cash flow or multiples of revenue.
Right.
So in order, the right answer is book value is the worst way to value a firm, and then getting more and more accurate would be then the multiple of revenue. Better than that is a multiple of cash flow best return on the investment, and then ultimately a discounted cash flow. Matter of fact, for a development company, when we value firms, the discounted cash flow at 85%, multiple of cash flow, we do have it as an anchoring effect. We weight that 12%, and the multiple of revenue we weight at 3%, which is indicative of how important we think each one of those elements are.
Very, very good, Dave. Thank you. Corey, can you comment on that? Are you all focused primarily on discounted cash flow? And one of the things that I sort of was wondering was, do the two parties involved debate the discount rate used? Is that an area, a topic of discussion, or how does that work?
Sure. So yeah, I agree with Dave a lot. We do a lot of M&A work, and listen, on smaller deals in the industry, especially when people are selling books of business, you'll see them sold on a revenue multiple or an EBITDA multiple or something like that. And it's not a sophisticated way to do it. Sometimes people on the really small side, aren't going to spend time and money on evaluation. But any kind of real deal, you want to get a valuation done, and you're looking at a discounted cash flow analysis. Whether they get, in terms of them getting negotiated, yeah. I mean, the discount rate itself, which is basically, the rate is basically based upon time value of money and some risk factor. Sometimes there's a discussion around that, but it's much more often a discussion around the actual value, right? Because
Sure.
Because it's the rate multiplied by the other factors. So what you really come down to, because however you run the formula, whichever lever you pull, it affects the number. So what we see is much more often a disconnect between what a seller thinks their business is worth and what a buyer is willing to pay for it, and that's the value of getting an outside valuation, because sometimes it gets people to be more realistic about what number can really get a deal done. And like Dave said, I mean the discounted cash flow is really the way to go on those deals. And then what we need to do is try to convince the parties that that's a place that makes sense, and have them be willing to do a deal at that number.
Right. Great.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Dave.
I
Sorry.
agree so much. joke that we get the most elegant model and a detailed discounted cash flow. We have, I think, 22 variables that go into the discount rate, so we're very methodical in what we do. But at the end of the day, if the two parties, disagree, you can push that model across the desk, and if a seller says that's not the right price, the deal's not going to get done. The valuation can be powerful to either articulate a point of view. It can be valuable to help the next generation understand why the firm's being valued at a certain amount, and that's also why we've created 3 levels. I think shortly here our level 1 and level 2 and level 3 valuations on RIA Match, and Mary has negotiated a 10% discount for anyone who uses us through the service. But it's a tiered way of providing really anyone in the marketplace with a discounted cash flow modeling at a pretty competitive price.
And we will get those. We will get those up in the store, and you'll be able to look at the different levels and see which ones you want to start with, or certainly reach out to Dave directly. Voldemort, you lead the. Thank you very much, Dave. That's a great explanation. And I've got your slide up here from DeVoe & Company about what enhances value, and it's such a great slide that's our slide for the rest of the webinar because it really holds the keys. So thank you for sharing that with us. Baltimore, you lead the Realizing the Value in Your Firm workshops for Fidelity, for Fidelity's clients around the country. What steps do you recommend before an advisor addresses valuation?
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. We just completed our 10th workshop. We've reached about 350, 400 of our clients. And I would say this: valuation is really important. I'd start with that, and the price really is often the immediate roadblock between possible deals being made and succession plans being executed, and it needs to be addressed. What we found, however, and to your question, is that a lot of times the education in our industry and the real focus is more heavily weighted towards the more mechanical side, I would say, the how and the when of succession, more of the mechanics versus the vision and the goals, the what and the why. What is it that the advisor is trying to accomplish? What are their goals? Why are they trying to pursue a certain succession strategy? And oftentimes, actually the majority of the time, they just haven't thought about that, which is why 75% don't have a ready succession plan. So in these workshops that we do, we've developed several creative tools to really get to prioritizing what's important. So ultimately what it boils down to, and what I would suggest to the listeners today, is find a way to envision what it is that you what it is that would make you successful in the end. What is it in terms of legacy that you want to take away? Whether it be a friend, family member, colleague, another advisor, try to kind of map out, list out all the different variables and then force rank those and prioritize them. What that's going to do is it's going to avoid some major struggles and battles over price when maybe price isn't your #1 goal. Focusing on the time horizon and other things you want to accomplish. You'd be surprised as to how many of our clients, after they go through some of these exercises, realize, you know what, getting the maximum value, the highest valuation, is important. It's not nearly #1. So going through that process of envisioning the future and determining what your goals are is really important.
Very good. I appreciate that. So we're going to do another poll. So let's go ahead and launch that. Alrighty. So again, we'll do the 20 seconds, 20, 30 seconds to do that. Just one sec. Let me get it out here. Hang on. My polling management is having a problem. Sorry, guys. Let me see if I can get it to go again. So our polling question is, who in your firm primarily drives new business? And see if I can get it to go. Technical difficulties here. So my polling issue is having a problem. I'm terribly sorry. But let's go ahead and what I want to do is address who the primary driver is in business development. And Valdemar, what can owners do to increase the value of her firm? How can she address that?
Yeah, so the way, there are many ways, of course, that an advisor can improve the value of his or her firm. Everything from, client concentration, to try to mitigate that, average household size, the age of the clients, different income sources, recurring versus commission, cost controls. There's all kinds of different ways, and I don't want to list all of those, although certainly that's probably of interest to many, and we can provide that. What I would focus on is the issue of growth, and the focus on growth of the business, and what the role of the owner or the founder is in that growth. And just the way that you think about the growth of a business, first of all, in most cases, and I know a good percentage of individuals on this call today are sole practitioners, single advisory firms, but there's others, and I want to address both in different ways. But first of all, the founder's business has been built on their efforts. It's largely been grown and enhanced because of your personality, your ability to drive new business. Clients have chosen to work with your firm because of how effective you are, how dynamic you are as an advisor. One quote, one of the authors I really like, Jim Collins, as you know, Good to Great, and most recently a book he put out, Great by Choice. A quote that he has that I often include in my presentations is, an organization is not truly great if it cannot be great without you. And I kind of tie that back to, for a business to improve valuation, first of all, as a baseline, you need to have consistent growth, demonstrable growth over a good time frame. But it also needs to represent growth that is not just from one principal. Now, for those who have multiple advisors in their firms, that's kind of a key point, and we like to share statistics that Fidelity has done, research we've recently done, that actually highlights even larger firms are highly dependent on their principals for driving new business. In fact, the most recent data we have is, if we look at firms that are under 50 million in AUM, 90% of them say they're entirely or highly dependent on principals for generating new business. If you move that up scale to firms that are 250 to 500 million in AUM, it's still at 86% dependency, high dependency. It's not until you get to a billion and more and above does that drop to 57%. And we know that in those larger firms, obviously there are many more than just one advisor. So again, what I would point to is it's very important to have a culture of growth in your firm. It's very important over time, if you want to move from a practice to a real business of enduring value, is that you find ways to have the majority of your business, advisors and also those that are supporting you, think about growth and business development. When I imagine and when I talk to our clients about this, you think about the idea of succession planning and valuation. What you want to avoid is the analogy of you're trying to sell a car without the engine. Okay, you're the engine driving new business. The value of your car clearly will be very different if you're removed from that car. And so the ability to make that more consistent throughout the firm is very huge. Now, for those who are just themselves and you're driving business, totally understand that that's going to be a limit. But what I would say here is you want to think about your firm's story, how you position your business beyond just you, so that not just the name of the business, but also what is it that you're offering? What is that value? The consistency, creating a growth culture even within your support staff, that mindset, and a consistent experience that takes that brand beyond just you, and then working that through into a longer-term transition to keep that value. So I'll pause there, but yeah, those are some thoughts on how important it is that growth is part of your business and how it should be distributed across all players.
Valdemar, thank you very much. And you've raised a point that sort of sticks out for me, which is the culture of growth. Bev, how does a firm, how does an advisor create a culture of growth?
You know, and I do want to underscore how important this is from a valuation perspective, because you can have a nice solid book of business, client retention, everything looks good on the face of it, but if you're not showing consistent growth, you're not showing the ability to be able to grow, the value is going to be diminished. So how do you create a culture of growth? Number one thing, and it sounds very simple, but we see very few advisors doing it, is to actually have a written plan as to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Advisors that sit down with people to manage their wealth will understand what they're trying to accomplish, put a plan in place, but when it comes to business development, where are they going to get new assets from? Is it going to be client referrals? Is it going to be strategic alliances? Is it going to be from prospecting? They haven't actually thought through, so they'll try something over here, something over there, and it isn't really an organized, thoughtful plan. So writing it down, making sure you're operating from a plan is critically important. The other big piece, and especially if you're a solo practitioner and you're in a small firm, is the time management issue. So advisors will tell us, well, I get distracted because the clients are calling me, something's happening with the market, so I just simply never get the time to put the focus on building my business. It's just not something I have time for in the day. And yet, it has to be managed. So if you have the plan, you have the written plan, you're able to share that plan with people in your firm, and then you're able to look at your calendar every day and allocate a certain amount of time to executing that plan, to the growth element. Those are going to be at least two critical first steps that you can take. The other big piece, if you really want to create that culture of growth, and that can be if it's just a solo person with an assistant or a larger firm, is communicating about it. How are we doing? Are we on plan? If we're off plan, why are we off plan? What's working for us? What's not? And having the conversations. In classic sales, we talk about the pipeline meetings or the update meetings. I think advisors need to do something similar every month, every quarter, keep this out in front and keep a focus on it.
And I think that having it documented is also a good idea, because you come back and it's right there and you've documented 3 months ago, this is what we said. You know, and sort of a checkpoint. Are we complying with what we are, our culture, our new culture? So I think that's a very good point. Thanks, Bev. Corey, looking through the regulatory filter, what does the firm owner need to be aware of as he gives others in his practice, in his firm, business development responsibilities?
Sure. There's a few items that I can talk about. One is obviously you need to make sure that person is representing your firm in the way that you want it represented, not only from a business point of view but from a legal point of view. So what are the services you provide? What have you said in your ADV Part 2 that is the scope of services, and make sure that they're not promising or representing anything outside of that, or certainly anything that's outside regulatory requirements, like the obvious one, promising future results. Another thing is to keep in mind that anybody who you give a certain level of apparent authority for, so in other words, let's say you give somebody a vice president title and they're out there, and internally they don't have the authority to sign on a big pension fund institutional client that you don't have the capacity to handle, but they have a title that gives apparent authority, that an outside person would think that they have the authority to do that. You got to keep in mind that they can bind you as to the third party. And that although you may have a claim against that employee, you are now contractually bound to the third party. So you want to make sure that you have some controls on that, and you're working with people you trust, and you're careful about what titles you give people. Also, if you lose, some smaller firms or even bigger firms will use outside parties, not necessarily an internal person. And then you really need to look at the referral or solicitor arrangement rules, depending, especially if you're state registered as opposed to SEC registered, as to whether your state allows that and what the requirements are around it. Does that person have to be a registered person or not, for example? And then finally, it raises the whole issue of who owns those clients. And what is your philosophy in terms of when people bring in those clients and whether they can leave with them? And are you going to have any kind of restrictive covenants in place? Are you a member of the protocol for broker recruiting? What's your philosophy when you're dispersing the business development opportunities on who owns those clients and whether people can leave with them?
Right. Very good. Very good. And now I was able to recreate that polling question. So I'm just going to launch it, even though we've discussed it and we've had a nice review of it, I'm going to go ahead and put the poll out there. And the question is, who in your firm primarily drives new business development? So we'll take just 20 seconds, 30 seconds to vote on that. And the results coming in are understandable because when we look at who's in our audience today, 35% are mature solo practices. So that makes sense. So we'll close the poll here in just a second. We'll give it to 35. Okay, I'm fibbing. We're going to give it to 40. I just want people to participate. This is great. So what we can see is that 53% of our owners only generate business development, 35% owners and non-owners, 6% advisors only, and 6% business development officers. So that makes perfect sense, and I appreciate you participating in that, and I will.
Hey, Marianne, can I add a quick thing? It's Valdemar.
Sure, Valdemar.
Yeah, so just thank you for doing that poll. And I would just add one thing here. Everyone on the call, advisors, should be asking themselves, I would suggest this, having owners only as business, driving in the majority of business, it's not a bad thing per se. Oftentimes that is what you enjoy doing. But the question that I challenge clients at Fidelity is it by choice that you're doing all the business development, or is it by default? And so kind of asking yourself that question is real important, because if it's by default, I would challenge you to think about that a little harder, both from just a valuation standpoint and also just moving your business into more of a solid enterprise.
Exactly. No, I appreciate that. So, Bev, how do you, as a business building expert, think about ways to increase the value of a firm?
Well, I want to talk actually about one, Marianne, that I think is often overlooked, and advisors don't think about it a lot, which is starting to take a hard look at who your clients are and the issue of client segmentation. There's a couple of pieces to client segmentation I want to touch on. I've really lost count of the number of times that when we're trying to do a marketing campaign or a drip campaign, communication campaign, and we'll ask advisors, who's in their client base. So they know each of their clients, and they know a lot about them, but they haven't really looked at them as the theme. What types of clients am I serving? What does my ideal client look like? How dispersed is my client base? Do I have a concentration in one area? Am I growing it deliberately, or am I doing it by default? If I have connections in a certain area, am I leveraging those connections? So it's that strategic look at the client base that if you're looking for a way to increase value, that is one place to start. The other piece around segmentation, and I think this is an increasingly common one with the aging of the baby boomers, is that many advisors, on the face of it, their client book looks very solid. They have a lot of clients. They've been with them a long time. But when we start to look at age, it's an aging client base. And do they have the relationships with that next generation, with the rest of the family? So how vulnerable is that client base if these people die, if they go into income distribution? How extended are those relationships that the advisor has? So two really critical places that you can start. We're looking for this in this webinar for low cost, easy things to do. That is one that doesn't cost you anything but time, but can yield tremendous ROI for today's value in terms of learning who your clients are and marketing to them differently, and for tomorrow's value in terms of extending those relationships and knowing what I really have in my client base and how valuable it really is.
So let me just go on that for just a second. So, for example, I've got my client base, and it's solid, and I'm feeling good about it. So if I segment and I find, I knew they were getting older, but a great deal of them are older, then my action step would be what? So now I know 60%.
Your action step would, yes. So your action step would be to segment them so that you know which categories they're in. And then to look at each one, Marianne, individually. What kind of a relationship do I have with this client, this couple? Do I have the relationship with the family? What do I know about their plans for this money when they retire, when they die? What's their trust situation like, their estate situation? So I need to sit down and really, do I have all the answers to this? And if I don't, I need to be able to look at that and either get working to extend those relationships throughout the family, or get involved with them in discussions about how are you going to protect this money, what are you going to do in income distribution, and what are you going to do, upon one of your deaths, or the death of both of the couple. So you would then have to take the action step to make sure that you are learning more about them and taking some action to understand more about what their personal situation really is.
Right, because you have all these clients, and so you have to start somewhere to take a holistic approach. So that's great. That's very helpful.
First step is knowing what's there, though.
Right. So, Dave, how do you have an example of client segmentation and leading to an increase in firm value?
Yeah, I think client segmentation can be a critical component of the process in valuation as well as business management. I see those two tied pretty closely together. The segmentation process helps you uncover, from a valuation perspective, certain amounts of risk as well as certain implications on mid or long-term growth. Mm-hmm. So from a risk perspective, a concentrated client or several clients that make up a significant percentage that creates some risks. And as a valuation expert, you can either manufacture that into a risk assessment and the discount rate, or you can start to determine what the effects on revenue could be in the future. And the same goes for the segmentation. We go through a process and categorize everyone in 10-year increments. How many of the advisor's clients are 80 to 90 years old, 70 to 80, 60 to 70, et cetera. Right. And then we have benchmarking data, not only industry-wide, but as I mentioned, we've done 35 different valuations now, so we have a great pool that we can assess it on as well. But perhaps as importantly is it's the story that you continue to hear today. Having strong growth numbers historically is really important to anyone who's contemplating acquiring your firm. It demonstrates success.
What do strong growth numbers look like? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Having the story behind those numbers is also critically important. And I've used an example of two firms with just identical fantastic growth rates, 35%, 30% growth over the last several years. And you sit down and you have a conversation with those two individuals. And first advisor, just dives into this client segmentation that they've done and sort of the key learnings that they had. We realized that we had an exposure in big clients, and more importantly, a lot of our advisors were aging, so we've gotten our junior folks more involved in talking to the .com and the technology folks, and we have this event strategy, and they go on and on and on. It's almost overwhelming because they're so passionate about how they're growing. And then you ask the second advisor who has an identical growth trajectory, how he or she achieved the result. They're sort of quiet for a moment, and they sort of think about it, and they say, I think it's just my charisma. I just connect with people really well.
Yikes. Yeah.
And, you can imagine which you really want to invest in. So it's having not only growth numbers, it's not only having a growth story, but ideally it's creating a growth machine that's really going to increase the value of your organization, whether you sell it or not.
Right. Sustainable and repeatable.
Absolutely. So the client segmentation process is one component of developing that effective machine for your organization. Great.
Thank you, Dave. Baltimore, you've been involved with a lot of practices. Have you seen client segmentation in action?
I have. And I guess what I would add to the two sets of comments prior to this is just to make sure that you don't lose track, don't lose sight of what's really important too, and that's enjoying your job today. I know we're very focused on valuation, but I just want to make that plug here is, making sure you have the right clients, the right target clients, those that you enjoy working with and enjoy working with you, number one. Secondly is having a superior client experience, making sure that's in place. And then thirdly, at that point, make sure that you are profitable across all the segments, but doing it kind of in that order. So the right clients, the best possible experience, and then are you profitable? And if you're not profitable in a particular segment, going back and asking, upwards the other two questions. Is that okay? Am I making the money I want to? Am I establishing a consistent business model that has worth? And that's a decision you make. But yes, I've seen lots of different approaches, and I agree. I think this is an important way of establishing more of a saleable, value-added practice by focusing on the right clients and a segment that works for your business.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you for all of the panelists for sharing your insights and actionable solutions. It's just tremendous for all of us to be able to hear your thoughts and ideas. As this is where you're professionalized, and we're very grateful for you sharing that. We want to spend, I know we're over by a little bit, but I didn't want to cut off people that were really imparting wisdom. So we want to spend the next, just the next 5 to 10 minutes with any questions that you may have. So if you've got questions, remember we worked with that question box originally. So you can go back in and type the question. And as I said, I just want to remind our audience that we'll be posting the questions in our Ask the Panel section of the REA Match website. And we encourage you to visit the REA Match store, where we have many of the solutions to today's topics provided by our panelists. We're going to be posting David DeVoe's firm financial valuations, Beverly Flaxington's The Collaborative Level 1, creating growth cultures in there. We have a few more items to put in, so please feel free to take a look and to check back on that. And just in the while you're thinking about questions you might want to ask us, I want to share with you something that happened to me today. With the storm that was coming through the East Coast, I got very concerned about my connectivity in order to host this website. So I had to physically change the location venue for hosting the site so that we didn't get cut off. And I'd like to say that it was all done smooth, but at the 11th hour I asked one of the panelists to back up. Should I back me up? Should I get cut off so that you all could still hear the panelists participate? So that contingency planning is important for all of us, and these are doable items. The topics that were reviewed today, from client segmentation to contingency planning, firm valuation, not necessarily are you getting ready to sell a firm, but what can you do? If we look at the what enhances value slide that we still have up here, if we look at what we can do to increase the value of our firm, we have tremendous knowledge in our industry. We're really blessed to have consultants and firms that are dedicated to helping us build our practices and grow our practices. And REA Match is dedicated to bringing advisors valuable information and ways to grow. So we will continue to have ongoing webinars and look forward to your participation. So no one has jumped in with a question, so that could be good, could be bad. I think that our panelists have answered them so thoroughly that there are no other questions to go for. So again, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our audience for taking the time to join us today. Thank you again very much for our panelists. We wish you continued success. Good afternoon. Thank you.